Family members often keep records in files, notebooks, boxes, or other ways. Asking relatives, you can often find records that will give you the date of death or at least enough information to approximate the year of death for a person. Funeral programs sometimes give the birth and death information, and sometimes they give short biographies. These are programs from my father and his father. The family has pictures taken during the funeral. Sometimes there's a date printed on the image. Images on a computer have a date that can help you find the approximate date of the death of the person. Here is the information from the computer on this image. We see that it was taken on April 2nd, 2019, so we know this person died a short time before this date. Does anyone in your family have an obituary for the person? If there's not a death date given in the obituary, you might be lucky if they have the date of the newspaper that would give the approximate date of the person's death. My aunt passed away a few years ago. A friend of mine went back to visit her family. She was looking at the local newspaper and noticed that someone whose maiden name was the same as mine was listed in the local obituaries. She sent me a copy of it. It was for my aunt. I know I saved the obituary, but I couldn't find it. I found one for my grandmother instead. Just remember that there are people like me who save lots of things, but they may not know where to find it. Give them time to look for items that you might ask them for. Does someone in the family have a copy of a person's death certificate? I went looking through my files and found my mother's death certificate. My husband also received copies of his mother's death certificate after she died. This is a receipt for Shannon's Funeral Chapel for a payment on the funeral expenses. This might not give you a date of death, but at least the approximate year of death. In this case, it would have been 1983. Find out if the family has any family history books. My great-great-grandmother wrote a personal history of her life. She tells about a few people who died. This is an entry about one of her sisters who died 6 months after her child was born. It says, in the early part of the winter, Ada's first baby was born, a fine little daughter named Freddie. But it seemed Ada never rallied and got her strength back. When the little one was 6 months old, Ada slipped away in the same quietness as she had always lived, a fine Christian character. This is a letter from my grandmother. In the letter, she tells how Grandpa's brother died traveling back from Winnemucca. Arnold went ahead and sold the cattle. He went into Winnemucca on New Year's Eve, was killed on the way back from Winnemucca. He lived for 4 days. Did the person who died have a will or trust? Does someone in the family have a copy of the will or the trust? This is a will of Jane Thompson, the second wife of one of my great-grandfathers. The end of the will is dated 22nd of September, 1845. This is an older will, so Jane likely died soon after this will was written. Many wills are written long before a person dies. In these cases, you would need to know when the will was recorded with the court to determine the approximate time of death. Was land or property sold after the person died? Does someone in the family have a copy of the deed? This is a deed where one of my great-great-grandfathers was selling land for his son William, who had passed away. This was in 1816, so we can estimate William's death to about 1816. It stated in there, it being the land that said John Thompson gave to his son William Thompson to have and to hold the said tract or parcel of land containing 268 acres. But John and his wife Mary are the ones selling it because William had passed away. This is a page from one of my great-grandfathers, Thomas Watts's military records. He served in the Civil War. He received a military pension for many years. In his military records, we find his death as the 23rd of February 1910 in Davenport, Oklahoma. People don't usually have military records on hand. I ordered the records from the National Archives. If If you would like to order copies of a person's military record, go to the National Archives website to order them. It's a little pricey, but in the case of my great-grandfather, Thomas Watts, I found his death date and where he died. This is a page from an alumni magazine from Brigham Young University. They dedicate a few pages in every issue to list alumni who have passed away. There are numerous records that might give clues to the approximate time that a person died. If someone is willing to let you look through their records that they have kept, you might find some unusual record, such as a closing of an account, the end of a pension, or the end of Social Security. If an underage child was left behind, it might be around the time that the Social Security checks were sent to the child or children. Many of these records will be discussed in more detail in upcoming videos. Happy hunting!